If you're creating the ultimate home theater, then you need a receiver that delivers uncompromising performance, stunning sound, crisp video, and is engineered to deliver an experience that will exceed your already high expectations. Say hello to the latest Sony ES receiver line because they elevate the standard. Hey, this is Brian from Worldwide Stereo coming to you from our headquarters in Montgomeryville, PA to chat about the new 8K Sony ES Atmos home theater receiver lineup. The ES is for Sony's elevated standard. In this video, I'll go over the features and connectivity you'd expect in any home theater receiver on the market today, and I will go down the rabbit hole of the features Sony is showcasing in the ES lineup. I got to spend some quality time with the Sony STR-AZ5000 ES and ran it through its paces with my home setup and on our CI test bench. Before I go much further, please let me point out that Sony's older ES lineup were the STR-ZAs, while the new ones are the STR-AZs. So if you're going to Google things, make sure you don't invert the letters, or you can click the link below to our dedicated ES receiver page and save yourself the trouble if you want to check the specs. Also, this video is separated into chapters. Skip around to find out what is most interesting to you, but if you like what I have to say, have questions, or if I don't answer a question that you might have, give this video a thumbs up and hit me up in the comments below. I'm always up to testing things out to answer questions, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Growing up, I aspired to own the coveted Sony Walkman or Discman, but I settled for the Kobe alternative. I attended CEDIA this year, where Worldwide Stereo had the privilege of a private showcase with Sony, where Sony engineers and designers proudly introduced us to the new ES receiver lineup, a culmination of years of effort. My colleagues and I got a glimpse of what was to come, and we got to pick the brains of those who had engineered the line. What an opportunity. It was exciting to go from that kid who couldn't afford a Discman to sitting down and drilling Sony for as many details as they'd allow about their new lineup. It's been a few months since the unveiling, but I finally got my hands on one, and now I get to share some of what I found with you. Let's talk about Sony for a second. Sony is easily the most popular manufacturer of electronics in the world. If you're watching Spider-Man on your PS5, you're watching a Sony movie made with Sony cameras, through a Sony player, on a Sony receiver, and probably on a Sony TV. Name another brand that can do that, they're kind of a big deal. Sony is known for its innovation and has a history of introducing groundbreaking products that have shaped the industry. They are known for high-quality products, a strong emphasis on design, and have built a solid reputation for exceptional customer service. These are the reasons why they have a large and loyal customer base, and many people trust that Sony will deliver reliable and high-quality products. It's no surprise that when they decided to go back into the receiver market, they went big and bold. With every receiver in the lineup being 8K and 4K 120 capable, they're ready to take you to the next level. The new Sony ES receiver lineup includes the following models. The STR-AZ1000 ES, a 7.2 channel receiver for $1,098. The STR-AZ3000 ES, a 9.2 channel receiver for $1,698. An STR-AZ5000 ES, a 11.2 channel receiver for $2,098. And finally, the top tier STR-AZ7000 ES, a 13.2 channel receiver for $3,298. Sony also released the STR-AN1000, which shares a lot of the characteristics of the 1000 ES. The AN1000 has almost the exact size footprint as the AZ1000 ES. However, it uses a different amplification stage, isn't as customizable in its setup, isn't as prepared for custom installations, and most importantly, it is not part of the ES lineup. I tested the STR-AZ5000 ES and I had a lot of fun with it. Let's look at this piece before we go into the capabilities of the line. The STR-AZ5000 ES is 17 inches wide, 7.75 inches high, and 17.3 inches deep. It shares the same dimensions as the 3000 ES and the 7000 ES, but it comes in at a different weight. The 5000 ES is 42 pounds and 6 ounces. The 3000 ES is a little under 42 pounds, and the 7000 ES is a solid 48 pounds. The difference is the amplification between the models. I'd like to add a few more details about the overall design of the receiver. The front of the panel looks very minimalistic at first on the STR-AZ5000 ES. There's a power button, a volume knob, and an LED screen. However, if you pull this cover plate off, you'll see there is a lot going on here. This is where you can manually control the receiver without having to find your remote. One of my favorite features of this ES receiver is full access to these buttons. When I'm doing installations or service visits, this allows me to get right to work. Or if I'm walking someone through troubleshooting, it's easy to walk them through with a big visual like this. My two favorite buttons on this receiver specifically is the test picture and the test tone buttons. I like that they do just those things. Test picture will show that the receiver is connected to your TV, which is one of the first troubleshooting steps I walk people through when they don't see anything on their TV. It eliminates the possibility of the receiver being an issue and can help figure out why the source may not work. Test tone will send sound through the speakers that are connected. This helps to determine if all the speakers are connected properly and they're making sound. Another great troubleshooting measure, and this is very easy to walk someone through. The buttons on the front match what you will find on the remote, but like I said, it's much easier for me to work through the front buttons. I like that Sony chose to go more simplistic with the remote as to not overcrowd it, but they left the most important ones available. But they did make sure that a lot of options are available on screen, and it's a very simple interface. The small LED screen will show you what input you're on and will give you feedback when you press buttons on the remote or the front of the receiver. When you raise the volume, you'll see it go up here, or if you turn on zone 2 or zone 3, it will all give you feedback. Now let's look at those inputs. One of the first things I want to point out is what the background color means, and this goes for all the models in the ES line. If the background is black, like it is here with the HDMIs, here with the RCAs, and with the digital connections, well, that means it's an input. If it has a white background, like these HDMIs, the RCAs for zone 2 and zone 3, as well as the pre-outs, that means they're outputs. This detail makes hooking up the receiver much easier. I can't tell you the number of service calls I fixed when someone plugged the subwoofer into the sub in and not the sub out. The STR AZ5000ES has a ton of inputs that will allow you to connect almost any AV device. What it is missing are component video inputs, as that chip has long sailed away, and a phono stage. Hopefully at this point, you've upgraded your component video devices to something with HDMI, so you won't have to worry about that. But if you're looking to connect a turntable, you'll need one with a built-in phono stage or a standalone preamplifier. For video playback, the 5000ES has 7 HDMI inputs, 1 in the front and 6 in the back. If you notice, the HDMI inputs on the back match up with the input buttons on the front. This is something I love because a lot of times when I'm servicing a receiver in a cabinet, I might not have full access to see behind the receiver. Knowing that there's a reference on the front just makes that part of the job a little easier. 4 of those HDMI inputs are capable of 8K and 4K 120. And if you still have a composite video device like the original NES, there are still 2 composite video inputs. For audio playback, the 5000ES has 4 analog RCA inputs, 2 optical or Toslink inputs, and 1 coax digital input. There's even an FM antenna input for terrestrial radio. The last input is one of the most rarely used inputs by consumers, but it's a popular one for custom installation pros like us, and that's the IR remote 1/8" connection in the back here and the RS-232C connection here. This is where we will connect our control systems for a clean and seamless installation. As for outputs, there are 2 HDMI outputs that are both capable of 8K and 4K 120. This one is labeled Out A and is your main output and technically your eARC or ARC input. This one is labeled Out B and is your secondary output. It can be set to mirror Out A or can be zone 2 to a separate display. I've done installations where the mirrored output is used where we'll have Out A go to a 75-inch OLED and then Out B go to a Sony projector that will display a drop-down screen in front of the TV for when you want to go big. For example, at our Montgomeryville showroom, we have a large screen TV as the main output, and then we have 2 projectors sharing the secondary output to a drop-down screen, so our clients can have a direct comparison. Not really what you do at your home unless you're the highest level geek. If you still have a lo-fi setup, there are also 2 composite video outputs. The analog RCA outputs here are for zone 2 and zone 3. This is to connect to an amplifier or power speakers to a separate area of your home. The pre-out section is for your main area and can be used for powering speakers with separate amps or for sending signals to subwoofers. As you can see here, we have 11 channels available, and this little missing space is because this is the same chassis used by the STR AZ7000ES, so that is where the 12th and 13th channels would be located. This spot here that's called the S Center Out is an 1/8" stereo output. This is a special output for Sony TVs. This connection allows you to use the speakers on specific TVs to act as your center speaker. The last outputs I'll talk about are up here are the trigger out and the IR remote out. The trigger outputs are 12 volts at 80 milliamps and are used to remotely power devices like amplifiers, subwoofers, or motorized screens. An input and output you won't see is the Bluetooth connection. It can only be set to 1, so you have to choose between the ES receiver being a transmitter or a receiver. Let's talk about 5 common features in the ES line. The Sony ES receivers are going to tick all the boxes like audio and video quality, power, connectivity, ease of use, and reliability. All the basics you're looking for when it comes to a home theater receiver. Every receiver in the lineup is capable of Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. The Sony ES receivers start with the STR AZ1000 ES at 100 watts per channel at 8 ohms and end at 150 watts with the STR AZ7000 ES. The STR AZ1000 ES and the 3000 ES have 2 dedicated subwoofer outputs. The STR AZ5000 ES and the 7000 ES increase their pre-outs from the 2 dedicated subwoofer outputs to having an unbalanced output for every channel. 11 channels for the 5000 ES and 13 channels for the 7000 ES. You'll use these if you want to bypass the internal amplification and power your speakers with a standalone amplifier, or if you want to add a dedicated subwoofer for any of your other speakers. Imagine a home theater with 13 speakers and 15 subwoofers. Overkill? Maybe. Amazing? Definitely. Chest exploding bass? Oh yeah. Number 2, 8K video. Sony ES receivers feature advanced video processing capabilities, including support for 8K video, 4K 120 for gamers, and deep color support with 4K HDR, Dolby Vision, and HLG, as well as advanced upscaling technologies that will take lesser video resolutions and upgrade them for greater clarity. The STR AZ1000 ES and the 3000 ES have 2 dedicated 8K and 4K 120 inputs, the ones labeled for media box and game. The STR AZ5000 ES and the 7000 ES have 4 dedicated 8K and 4K 120 inputs, HDMI 1 through 4 on the back. They also have a front HDMI input, but that does not support the highest resolution. If you move your game console from room to room, be sure to have a dedicated HDMI cable that runs to the back of the receiver. Which leads us to number 3, multi-zone audio and video. Multi-zone is industry speak for multiple room support. For example, Zone 1 would be your main space like your home theater. Zone 2 would be a secondary area that you'd share the same sources to, like your kitchen, office, or patio. Zone 3 is an additional area that would be reserved for audio-only sharing to an area like your living room, your dining room, or your party room. Sony ES receivers are capable of processing video to 2 different displays. You can have this set up in 2 different modes, Zone 1 and Zone 2, or TV out A and B. Zone 1 and 2 would be for sharing sources between 2 different rooms, while TV out A and B is for when you're having sources in the same room, like when you install a TV for primary watching, but you also have a projector in the same room for when it's movie time. The STR AZ1000 ES will only allow analog audio out to Zone 3. The STR AZ3000 ES, 5000 ES, and 7000 ES all have analog out to Zone 2 and Zone 3. Depending on your speaker configuration, you can also use the onboard amplification to play to these areas. If you've maxed out your speakers for your home theater experience, you can always add a separate amp to power those additional areas. In fact, with the 5000 ES and the 7000 ES, you could choose to use the amplification from the receiver to power your Zone 2 and Zone 3, while you use a separate amplifier to do your Atmos sounds. They're quite flexible, and the configurations can change depending on your desire and the gear you want to use. If this sounds like a lot, that is what we're here for. Leave a comment below or call one of our gear experts at 866-961-7781 with questions and buying advice. Number 4, streaming. Sony ES receivers can be directly wired to your network or can use the built-in Wi-Fi, and they have Bluetooth capabilities. You'll be able to use Bluetooth, Spotify Connect, AirPlay 2, Chromecast, and Sony's own Music Center app to play back music through the ES receivers. This allows you to play music streaming from your devices through Bluetooth or over your network. I tend to use network streaming because I don't like the distance limitations of Bluetooth and I can send high quality audio. From my test, it seems that the AirPlay 2 capped at CD quality, 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz, but using Chromecast I was able to see high resolution audio up to 24-bit 96 kilohertz. Through the Sony app, I was able to get the highest resolution with my own audio files, but it also took the most amount of work. If you're up to it, it's there, but it's not my bag. Before we move on from Bluetooth, it's important to know that the ES receivers can only be set to send or receive. If you plan on Bluetoothing music to your ES receiver, the Bluetooth will be set to receive. If you plan on connecting Bluetooth headphones, like I did with the Sony XM5s, which I'll talk about later, the Bluetooth will be set to transmit. There are some limitations when you set the receiver to transmit, but Sony added warnings to give you a heads up so you can make an educated choice. Number 5, custom integration. The ES series was created with custom integration in mind, and that's something integrators like us really appreciate. The receivers have RS-232 and IP control. This means that I have access to an extended list of custom commands that can be sent to the ES receivers. For example, we can program the ES receiver to go to a specific sound mode like Dolby Atmos when you select Blu-ray on your remote, and we could do something as tricky as to say always start at 40% volume. It also means the receiver can talk back to the control system that I'm installing. The receiver will be able to tell me if it's on, what input you're on, and the volume you started at. Control systems that we install like Savant and URC's Total Control are able to react and mold the environment to what you want without you having to grab the remote. As you get into the higher level receivers like the 5000 ES and the 7000 ES, you will find 12-volt trigger outputs. If you're unfamiliar with trigger outputs, they are used for a variety of automations. You can use them to trigger the power on of an ancillary amplifier that you may have to connect for more power to your main speakers, a subwoofer amplifier for passive subs, or to a multi-channel amplifier you might have for other rooms of your home for the Zone 2 and Zone 3 we spoke about. You can also use the triggers to engage peripheral equipment. The trigger can activate a motorized screen to drop down when the receiver turns on because it's movie time. I've even used receiver triggers to track the power state of a receiver so I can disengage a motion detector that controls the lights in a theater. Triggers allow a lot of versatility and allow custom integrators like Worldwide Stereo to make magic. 5 things that make the ES receiver more than just an 8K Atmos receiver. Number 1, 2-channel biamping. Yes, I understand that you may not have an Atmos setup or even a surround setup, but don't let that deter you from thinking one of these receivers won't be right for you. The first configuration I tested this in was a 2-channel system. And if your first reaction is why, it's simple. I did that because I wanted to break down my test to the simplest element. Will it work in stereo? And will it sound good? And yes, it did. I will say I may have cheated by utilizing a rarely used feature receivers have, which is using them in a biamp configuration. Since my Bowers & Wilkins speakers are biamp capable, it was a no-brainer to set them up that way. I also took it as an opportunity to see how good their room correction could be, which leads me to my next point. Number 2, room correction. Sony introduces Digital Cinema Auto Calibration, or DCAC, EX, into the new ES series. Sony's new EX calibration made my imperfect speaker setup sound like I added a center channel to my mix because the stereo imaging made the vocals stand directly in front of me, while I could still hear the instrumentation bounce between the left and the right speakers. While doing the calibration, I found it is interesting that Sony gave different options of picking their calibration characteristics of the speakers. The options were full flat, engineer, front reference, and then just off. Full flat mode makes the measurement of the frequency from each speaker flat. The engineer mode sets the speakers to the frequency characteristics of the Sony listening room where the ES receivers were developed, meaning your speakers will sound similar to how they sounded to the engineers. There's even a little dot next to this option as it is the suggested setting. The front reference mode adjusts the characteristics of all speakers to match the front speakers, meaning all your speakers would begin to sound like your front stage. I chose full flat as my testing mode. After the calibration, I could hear the detail and the sound space was big. And this was just 2 speakers. I do this in a 2-channel setup because I walk before I run. If you don't believe me that there is a difference even after you've purchased it, and that your ear can do a better job, just spend the 5 minutes it takes to set up and test it for yourself. One of the advantages of Digital Cinema Auto Calibration EX is that it can provide a more precise and accurate calibration than manual setup, which can be difficult and time consuming. Additionally, the DCAC can help compensate for factors like room acoustics and speaker placement, which can have a significant impact on sound quality. Sony went through a lengthy process to make sure that when you're performing the setup, you get all of the correct measurements, and runs through how to do so on the screen. They provide a dotted green line to line up your measurements so you're perfectly tuning in your system based on your room. The simple instructions take away the guesswork of, am I doing this right? Is this the correct spot? A tape measure is your friend and will make a demonstrable difference when it's set up. Sony's DCAC EX is designed to work with a variety of speaker configurations, including both traditional 5.1 and 7.1 setups, as well as the more complex arrangements that include Dolby Atmos or DTS:X height channels. This will help out in a range of room types from large dedicated home theaters to smaller living rooms or even bedrooms. Number 3, works with Sonos. What is important about the Works with Sonos label? Works with Sonos is a certification program that ensures compatibility between Sonos devices and other third-party products, like one of these Sony ES receivers. The Works with Sonos badge means the Sony ES receivers have been tested and meet certain technical requirements required by Sonos to earn the certification. This allowed Sony to integrate a Sonos port or their legacy Sonos Connect to seamlessly integrate with the Sonos app. That means the ES receivers will not only turn on to the input the Sonos is connected to, after you set it up of course, but will also set the receiver to a dedicated volume. This is important because now you can leave your Sonos device on a variable volume. This will allow you to control the volume in the Sonos app. Essentially, the Sonos app will treat your Sony receiver like it's another device in their ecosystem and allow you easy control. It's by far one of my favorite features because it is something I used daily while testing this out, because I have a large Sonos system in my house. Now stay with me on this one. Something I really enjoyed testing, and I can't believe it worked, was I connected the new Victrola Stream Carbon turntable, another Works with Sonos product, to the Sonos Connect that I had associated to the STR AZ5000 ES. So when I turned on the turntable and dropped the needle on the record, it turned on the Sony ES receiver, changed it to the CD input where the Sonos Connect was connected, changed the Sonos Connect to the Victrola Stream, and my record just started playing. All of this was initiated by the needle hitting a record. It did so much while I did so little. I think it's really cool. Number 4, Roon tested. Another cool thing is the ES receivers are Roon tested. Why does that matter? From a number of my videos, you've heard me talk about Roon when it comes to high resolution audio. Roon is the service I use to control and play the music through my system at home. It's by far my favorite because it's dedicated to making sure the highest quality audio can be played. With the addition of Chromecast as an option in the ES receiver, I was able to stream up to 24-bit 96 kHz audio from my music collection directly to the STR AZ5000 ES that I was testing out. This was actually one of my favorite parts of testing out the 5000 ES. I was able to compare how it played against my 2-channel system, but I got to really see how well the DCAC room correction worked, and I got to enjoy the high quality audio streams. Number 5, voice assistant capable. The Sony ES line will also have the ability to use a variety of voice assistants. You can ask Alexa, Google, Josh, or Jeeves to help you out. And because Sony is designing specifically for these voice assistants, you'll get more specific commands that they will fulfill. So you can ask Alexa politely to turn the ES receiver on, to set the volume to 60%, or to change to the game input. 5 deep cuts. Let's talk about the little things, the deep cuts, the parts that you didn't know you wanted to know. Number 1, amp mode for setup. I hope there is someone out there who was as jazzed as I was when I started playing around with the amp mode setup. This button allowed for the LED screen on the receiver to act as the on-screen display, so I didn't need to have a monitor to run through the setup of the receiver. A lot of receivers that I have set up in clients' home have been in remote scenarios. We'll have equipment in the rear of the room or a closet or in a separate area where I can't see the television. Being able to do the same setup process and to see that on the front of the receiver was quick and easy. I'll often run through setups faster than what people can follow, and I did find it was quicker going through the amp mode than using the remote. Number 2, video resolution output testing. From a setup standpoint, I really like that the receiver can send a video signal. Usually, I have to grab our HDMI signal generator to do this. It's a step-by-step process that we do to ensure that everything in the system is capable of performing to its highest capabilities so we can meet our clients' expectations. The ES receiver allows you to adjust the generated output to find the limitation of your HDMI cable or your display. Often it's not an issue of whether the display can handle the resolution, but if it's set up correctly. There are different modes for video or specific inputs on displays that handle standard resolutions versus enhanced resolutions. The ES receivers can output from the lowly 480p to new kid on the block 8K. It will also run through a variety of HDR formats and color spaces. By adding this ability to test the output straight to your display, Sony cut out a lot of guesswork or troubleshooting. You won't need to have test equipment to determine if you're running in spec, because the receiver has it built in. I think that's exciting, but I also know I shouldn't be excited by high definition video signal generation based on resolution and color space. I matched the ES receiver with my Sony XM5s using Sony's own LDAC Bluetooth communication protocol to create a perfect bridge between the receiver and the headphones. It allows for a high resolution audio experience without disturbing your household, and it gives you control of the volume directly on the XM5s rather than having to grab a remote. I loved having this setup because my living room TV is set up directly across from my kitchen, and I was able to continue testing and enjoying a movie while I got to prepare dinner. Usually I'll get the TV is too loud because I have to turn it up to be louder than the rushing water of my sink or the turbo engine of my air fryer. Now, I just needed to explain why I was wearing headphones in the kitchen while I was by myself. Number 5, wireless speakers. I live in an apartment and I don't have the ability to create the Atmos surround sound system that I would like. I can't run wires to the back of my room without them being exposed, and that's not the look I'm going for in my main living space. The ES receivers have the ability to play Sony's wireless speakers to create rear channels through powered speakers. You can argue that it's not the ideal setup, but I'm happy that it's an option for someone like me. A simple yet awesome option is Pure Direct mode. If you're unfamiliar with this, the Pure Direct mode on a Sony receiver is a setting that allows for a cleaner and more direct audio signal path by bypassing certain circuitry and processing in the receiver. I switched this mode on and off while testing the SDR AZ5000ES to see if I could hear a difference, and to my ear, it did. When the Pure Direct mode is activated, the receiver will bypass the tone controls, bass management, and the digital signal processing, the DSP, that can sometimes alter the audio signal. This results in a more pure and unadulterated audio signal being sent directly to the amplifier and then to the speakers, providing a more accurate representation of the original audio source. When you're listening to high quality audio sources, such as high resolution audio files, where it's important to maintain the integrity of the original audio signal, you want to make sure you're maintaining the most accurate representation. So if you're planning on streaming high resolution music like I did when I streamed Qobuz through Roon, or if you hooked up your turntable to spin some vinyl records, this is a mode that you will need to turn on. Don't worry, there's an easy button on the remote that turns it on and off, and in the Sony app, there's a toggle button. It can also be useful when listening at lower volumes, as it can reduce background noise and distortion that may be introduced by the receiver's processing circuits. This feature is available in most Sony receivers, so if you don't believe me, give it a try. Custom integrators like us at Worldwide Stereo absolutely love Sony products because not only do they create excitement in your home theater, but they allow us to fine-tune our installations for customers. For example, there's a speaker setting to choose when your front speakers are in-ceiling speakers and not standard front-facing floor speakers. Knowing that there is a difference between them, Sony created a selection to enhance the sound based on the specific installation type. We do a lot of in-ceiling speaker surround systems for rooms that can't fit traditional speakers, and I appreciate there being a setting to specifically enhance that kind of installation. Sony aims to make their products the piece in a system that no one needs to worry about or wonder if it's going to perform to the expectations you have. But for good measure, remember all of the ES series receivers have a 5-year warranty. A 5-year warranty is rare when it comes to electronics. Usually you must purchase an extended warranty to get that length of coverage, but Sony is including it with every ES receiver. Add in that Sony has a toll-free support staff specifically for the ES receiver lineup that are there to help you through your setup issues or problems that may arise. It is a big deal. I think that shows a lot of confidence on Sony's part, and it should offer some good peace of mind that you're looking into a well-manufactured product. Finally, don't forget to invest in 48 gig HDMI cables so you can get the full bandwidth you need when you go to the highest resolutions. That free one that came with your cable company won't cut it, and you're better than that. The all-new Sony ES AV receiver lineup has all the capabilities you may not know that you want. Picking your model is dependent on the home theater system you're looking to create. If you're looking for a receiver that will handle the Ultra HD video of your latest gaming system and create a 5.1.2 Atmos surround, you can start at this STR AZ1000ES. If you start jumping into powering speakers in other areas of your house, you should jump to the STR AZ3000ES to cover your amplification needs. If you're looking for a receiver that will be the conductor of your home audio video dream, the STR AZ7000ES will be your maestro. Sony wanted their newest receivers to have all the bells and whistles that consumers have been asking for. Their team of world-class engineers have spent the better part of the last 5 years going through what the market demands are and started ticking off the boxes so they can release a receiver lineup that will excite the masses and make custom integrators like Worldwide Stereo smile. Is there anything you'd like to do that this lineup would be unable to do? Within reason, folks. A receiver can't do your taxes or walk your dog. Light up the comments and I'll be happy to assist in your research. Thank you for joining me for our review of the new 8K Sony ES Atmos home theater receiver lineup. You can learn more about this online at worldwidestereo.com, or if you're in the area, you can stop by our showrooms in Ardmore or Montgomeryville, PA. We offer 60-day returns, free shipping on all orders, and we're authorized dealers for everything we sell. If you have any feedback or questions, leave them in the comment section below, or you can call or email us at any time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos. This is Brian from Worldwide Stereo. Thanks for tuning in.